Hey folks, and welcome back. This is most likely going to be a pretty short episode. But there's just one thing that I started thinking about after having recorded the last episode. If you remember, we implemented this menu here with the roles, the avatar roles, allowing us to switch to different parts of the vehicle to control things like cranes and whatnot. And I mentioned that there's this ever so slight lag when moving between these items in this menu. And that is because we're running on a client-server system, and the server is the one actually making these selections. And last time I mentioned that I could maybe mitigate this a little bit with some more direct network transport, trying to send the data quicker to the server to get a response, etc., etc. And it kind of hit me that I don't necessarily need to do that to make this snappier. I can use something called client-side prediction, which is typically used to when synchronizing these objects, such as these cars, over the network. Like you do client-side predictions for movement, and indeed Basis does do that. It uses a pretty rudimentary form of client-side prediction, where we're actually running two different physics simulations, one on the client and one on the server, and the one on the client just sort of gets corrected over time, essentially, to the state on the server, unless the object is marked as existing only on the client. And you don't typically do client-side prediction for things like menus, because there's typically not really any point in doing it. But the way we have this set up should allow us to actually do that kind of easily, while still having the system be just as robust as it was before. So let's have a look at why this happens first of all. Let's go into like Zen mode here. So the whole code for the selection logic is inside this avatar role tracker here. And we have this tick method. On the server, we do a bunch of input reading. We read the input state for showing of the avatar screen, for moving up in the menu, as well as moving down in the menu. And like I said, all of this happens on the server, so it will not be instantaneous on the client. What we do with these things is propagated back to the client eventually through these things called propagated values. And we have here in the post init, if we are on the client, we set these value changed callbacks, so that when the visibility changes or when the highlighted role index changes, we fire these two methods here. And particularly this highlighted role index thingy, we have this printf here, which we can play around with. There's this local change parameter here, and local change here means that if you set this propagated value on the client and you're reading this on the client, you're capturing the change, so you're inside this on highlight role index changed on the client as well, then this local change will be set to true. If this fires because it was set on the server and it's propagated to the client, then the local change will be set to false. So currently, without making any other changes, if we just print this as well, so we do highlighted and we do local change, and we print whatever is in there as well, just like this. And we can go out of Zen mode and back into normal mode. Let's just run this. And see what we get. And that succeeded. So let's have a look. So now, if we move this a little to the side so that we can see everything a bit better, if I move down, you can see the local change is false all the time. So now it's 0, local change is false. Now it's 1, local change is false, and now it's 2, local change is false. So what this tells us is that the change happens on the server, and it's propagated to the client, just like we essentially imagined it would. And there's ever so slightly, the menu is ever so slightly laggy. I know it doesn't really show on the video, but you're just gonna have to trust me on that. Okay, so what happens if we take this if away here? In fact, I know that we're gonna want to do that, so let's just do it. So now we're ticking on both the client and the server. We're doing the exact same things on the client and the server. We're reading on the client, reading the input on the client as well, and we're setting these propagated values here on the client as well. Well, what will happen most likely is that we will get the changes much quicker, and we will essentially get this thing fired twice. Once for the local change and once for the eventual propagated change. The propagated change is the one that will actually matter because it's coming from the server, and the server is the one who is the almighty ruler of everything. And if there is an argument about the state, then server is the one that wins that argument. You can immediately see here that now that we've actually set this to 0 because we set it as the avatar, we get 2 of them. We get two times. The callback fires 2 times. Once with local change set to true, which means that the change was made on the client, and we are also listening to it on the client. The other is the server, and we're still listening to it on the client. So now if I move down, you see true false, true false. You can see that they are not appearing at the same time. There's like a 10 millisecond or 100 millisecond or something delay. True false, true false, true false. And I also know that it doesn't show in the video, but the menu is much snappier now. So that's kind of interesting. Another way to sort of highlight this thing is that if we just quickly go into our UI manager, we can just for shits and giggles, we can put in a new property here, and we just call this pred for predicted. Set it to false. And here in this index changed, we can set that property as well. So we do goofy manager set property value. It's bool. The name is pred, and the value is essentially, is it predicted or not? If this is a local change, we know that this only fires on the client because we only register it on the client, right here on client. So if this is a local change, we know that this change is a predicted change. The client has essentially client-side predicted it, that it will happen. And we set that to true. And then in the actual selection screen, when we're rendering this, we can do something interesting with this. We can do if. Actually, we need to read it first. So just read it into goofy manager get property value, and it's a boolean, and the name is pred, right? Yeah, I will use it. So if pred, just set the color to something else. So basis color, I don't know, yellow or something really obvious. Something really obvious. And if it is not actually predicted, then it goes back to its same semi-transparent gray. That should make it easier to see see the difference in the sort of round trip from the client to the server and back, as opposed to just reacting on it directly on the client. So now you can see that it flashes yellow. And essentially the time that it stays yellow, which is not that long, admittedly, but if the network connection is really bad, I mean, if you're really playing with someone on the other side of the planet, then maybe it can occasionally be half a second or a second, or in theory it can be like 10 minutes. But my point is that delay can be quite long, and you still want the logic to be determined by whatever the server thinks. But maybe it's better that we have it reacting to your local key presses locally and showing them like this immediately. I think so. So obviously we're not going to keep this. That was just for illustration's sake. But I think it's kind of an interesting thing, and it was a really easy fix. So the fix is essentially just to remove the if around these, so that we're ticking these things on both sides, because we were already calling tick here on both the client and the server. And so now we're reading the input on both sides, and that just naturally means that we'll get one unauthoritative but fast version of the truth, and then another, like just after that, a slightly slower but authoritative version of the truth. So if for some reason these things get slightly out of sync, the server will arrive and correct the situation. Now, admittedly, this is not a very complex things, and there aren't that many things that can really go wrong here. But I mean, I guess the index can still go out of sync. If we want to, we can do one thing here. There's this place where it's not there actually. It's here. So if we're closing the menu, we're setting the active role index to something else, and this is something that we might want to do only on the server, right? So only switch the active role. Let the highlighted role index be freely controllable from the client, but only set the active role index on the client. That shouldn't be a problem anyway, because you're not flicking between the active role the same speed that you're switching between those things in the editor. So I think this is sort of the best of both worlds, and now it is much quicker, snappier, and this still doesn't have anything to show for itself. But yes, this was a fun little thing that came about because I started thinking like it can't be this tricky. But as you can see, these even like a simple menu such as this can become quite advanced quite quickly. Let's get rid of our pred property. So don't tell me that menu programming is boring and simple. It's not necessarily that at all. Anyway, this was a fun little episode, and it actually turned out really well. Works just as nicely and snappily as I had hoped. So, on that note, I thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next one.